The race is on to become the next mayor of North Charleston. In this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, I sit down one-on-one with mayoral candidate John Singletary one-on-one. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. John Singletary, it's so good to see you again.
Good seeing you as well, Quintin.
I appreciate this. You know, you and I had a good talk over the phone last Monday, April 23rd. And a couple of things stuck out to me when you talked to me. You basically said this: you're not anti-white, you're not an angry black man. The community that you want to represent is really underserved. And for a lot of people, some people think that you personally attack somebody, and you basically say, no, you never personally attack somebody. You also said that his record as an incumbent is up for discussion. And don't get mad at the messenger, but look at the message. You in your campaign, you say, are focused on North Charleston and also follow the money. A couple of things stuck out to me in that. Let me go to the top. It says this: don't get mad at the messenger. Look at the message. So what is the message right now that you need to tell to the people of North Charleston?
Well, the message to the people of North Charleston is quite simple, that it's time for a new North Charleston. If we are going to allow each citizen in North Charleston to be able to take full advantage of the resources of the city, then there has to be a new administration. Present administration has been there for 25 years. The African American community, for instance, is 50% of the population. However, they only get 1% for the special projects out of $18 million. Out of $67 million for contracts, they only get 3%. $2 million out of $67 million, leaving $65 million for the people in the buddy system. When you take a look at the wages, $66 million. African Americans, 50% of the population, they only receive $10 million. $56 million going elsewhere. It's the same with resources and other things in the city. And so when you take a look at North Charleston, the picture that must be painted for not just blacks, but whites as well, is that if fairness, fundamental fairness, is going to be the new standard in North Charleston, then we must change the administration.
You talk about wages. Let me go to the other topic that you told me about: follow the money. Where is the money in all of this in North Charleston?
Well, the best place to go to follow the money in North Charleston would be the Spending Transparency Report. If you go to the city's website, to government, and then you go down to the Spending Transparency Report, you can actually see where each dollar is being spent. And so when we take a look at, for instance, at one point, every single month, the mayor was paying the utilities for churches. And the entire time that that payment was being made, not once did he ever make a payment to an African American churches, white churches only. And so that was a slap in the face. When we take a look at, of course, like I said, the jobs, the contracts, the special projects, when we take a look at things like Barnes Avenue LLC, or when we look at Leeds Avenue LLC, those are LLCs, Leeds Avenue, for the Charleston Chamber of Commerce. Every single month, they take 2 checks and give to them in order that they will then offset their rent costs. And the public needs to know that. When they give millions of dollars, for instance, to Attorney Berlinski, without allowing us to know through FOIA what it was for, then that's a slap in the face. When we take a look at the lawsuit that was filed, for instance, years ago against the mayor by 2 women for sexual harassment, the money came out of the city because the city was sued. However, we were not allowed to find out how much it was and which funding pot it came out of. And so when I say follow the money, what I mean is take a look at the Transparency Spending Report. Take a look at the weed and seed funding, for instance, that came in. Take a look at the federal funding that comes in for different programs, and then ask through FOIA what is being done with our money.
And you talk about, obviously, his record as an incumbent needs to be up for discussion. What else would you discuss about that?
Well, the entire record, primarily the funding, because funding is what drives the community. When we take a look at parks and playgrounds, for instance, parks and playgrounds, they just put a couple $1 million into, out of the 16 parks and playgrounds, just a few of them. They happen not to be in the African American community. When we take a look at, in terms of the money, something as simple as the streets. The streets in most of the African American neighborhoods are such that standing water is always there. When we take a look at what happens when flooding comes, in many of the neighborhoods, flooding destroys homes over and over and over. But around his neighborhood, he built a very expensive moat in order to keep the water from rising. When we take a look at the education system, even though it's under the county, the city does contribute and help. And we look at the underserved communities, our African American communities. We get very little funding. However, they can take something like, for instance, the Academic Magnet. Used to be a historical black school, the only one left in the city. And they turned that around to be one of the top 10 in the country, inside of a black neighborhood, fenced it off so they cannot access it, and the city has contributed to funding. When we take a look at gentrification, the city has taken the plan that has come from Charleston, the #1 gentrified city in the entire United States, and they have put that plan on steroids. The city is practicing not only gentrification but exclusionary zoning, partly through annexation. When we look at Oak Terrace, for instance, it is owned by the city of North Charleston. They sell to 97% Caucasian, and they have done it through using TIF and CDBG funds. So everybody is getting to pay for that area being gentrified. We are now #1 in terms of North Charleston in evictions in the entire nation. So here it is, we have 50% of the population being African American. We have the Caucasians being 38%, 12% Hispanic and Asians and other. And we have the plan for the #1 gentrified city in America. We are #1 when it comes to evictions. Those things coming together, it's the perfect storm to simply wholesale get rid of the African American community. And, it's atrocious that we as leaders will sit, not challenge, and allow something like that to happen.
And you're basically saying, hey, you're not anti-white, you're not an angry black man. Mm-hmm. Can you reintroduce yourself to the people of North Charleston?
Absolutely. I say I'm not an angry black man because there is no need to get angry when you have the wherewithal to do something about the situation. We have 53% of the voting population happens to be African American, 63% of the overall registered voters. All whites in the city of North Charleston are not along with the buddy system, nor are they getting anything out of the city. When we take example, if you had a child, 2 children, and you gave one all the resources, even though the children love each other and they are siblings, there's going to be some animosity. Why? Because as the leader of that family, you have mismanaged the funding and given all of the funding to one, and that creates the animosity. That is what is happening in North Charleston. So that's why I say I'm not anti-white, simply because all whites are not a part of the buddy system. All whites do not benefit from the buddy system. In fact, as a result of their association with African Americans, oftentimes they too are ostracized and kept out of the funding stream. Reintroducing myself to North Charleston is quite simple. I'm from North Charleston, homegrown, well educated as a result of my education in North Charleston. Went to the Citadel and Butler University, spent time in corporate America. I'm back home, and when I take a look at what's going on in the city, I simply am not going to sit and allow such things to continue. I've got children, and there are people in the community that has given to me, and now it's my turn to give back. And in doing that, it is incumbent upon me to study, research, to find out what's going on, and to paint a true picture of what North Charleston is offering all of its citizens. If we were to take the city of Charleston, say 30 years ago, and we took a look, everyone was happy with what was going on. Today, the #1 gentrified city in America, it is because there was some complacency, and as a result, African Americans wholesale, 50,000 were driven out of the city. North Charleston is the next city for that to happen to, if in fact we don't do something about it. The city of Charleston now is dealing with gentrification in its truest sense. It's a term that comes out of Europe, where whites who were wealthy gentrified areas that were white, where they were less socioeconomic fit. And so as a result, it was literally whites against whites. The city of Charleston, now that they have run the blacks out, is experiencing gentrification in its truest form. Many of the whites who are retired and lived there, grew up there, can't afford to stay because other, predominantly whites, are coming in who are extremely wealthy. The cost of living has gone up, the cost of housing has gone up, and as a result, they are now driving them out of the city. So North Charleston, for the whites that are left, not a part of the buddy system, they too will experience the very same thing once African Americans have been driven out. And that's why it behooves all those who are interested in fundamental fairness to come together to change the administration. Of course, there are many things that we want to offer to the citizens. We want to make sure that they're fair jobs, fair contracts. When I say fair jobs and contracts, I'm talking about a living wage. I'm talking not about $15 an hour, but more like $25 an hour, $52,000 and up on the jobs that we intend to bring. Contracts, there needs to be fair contracts. The procurement process right now, if that's what it can be considered, is riddled with contracts that are sole sourced to personal friends, contracts that are given without a proper procurement process, which means that oftentimes those who could get the contracts aren't even allowed to apply for the contracts. That's something that has to change in the city. When we take a look at not just the contracts, not just the jobs, but as I said before, the resources being distributed out of the 16 resource centers or community centers, like I said, there's only 3 or 4 that they put money into. The others, absolutely nothing has been done. In fact, many of them were closed down since the statement of retribution. And what that means is that in those areas, there's less for the children to do, whether it be in the evening or whether it be in the summertime. And so we need to put money back into the community. Excuse me. What I recommend is comprehensive community centers that are more neighborhood friendly and offer a whole lot more than the standing building that they have now without any amenities in it. We offer fair contracts so that those who are in the community, particularly those who are local businesses, get to come in and partake of the resources that are in the city. All of these things must be done. Transparency, accountability, which is almost void in the city at this point. We should have greater transparency, greater accountability when it comes to the public funds that are accumulated through tax dollars and permits and everything else in the city.
And obviously, if you were to be elected North Charleston mayor, you'll be working alongside the new North Charleston Police Chief, Reggie Burgess.
Absolutely.
How would you work with him in your mind?
Like I would with any police chief. Of course, what we know is that the police chief concentrates on crime, whether it be helping to prevent crime or once a crime has occurred, taking care of the situation.
Sure.
in my opinion, the police chief, no matter who is there, it is incumbent upon them to take that budget. In this case, $35 million is the budget for North Charleston police force or department. To make sure that within that department there's fundamental fairness, there's parity. So it should mirror the demographics in the city. That means from the top down in terms of positions as well as pay, which means 50% African American, 38% Caucasian, and 12% Hispanic and Asian. Operational budget, when it comes to everything from the spark plugs that are purchased to the oil to collision repair,
Right.
that operational budget too should be divided based on parity. It should mirror what the demographics in the city says. And that is not being done. So I would work with any department head to make sure, police chief included, that the budget for that department mirrors the demographics. In terms of the crime, I think that community policing is something that we need to do a better job at. And so, whether Reggie or anyone else who is the police chief, I think that it is the community policing that is going to help to start us on the right track. We know that we have a history in North Charleston of racial tension when it comes to the police force. I don't think that the racial tension is a result of any one neighborhood being any worse than another. I think it's a top-down decision to make sure that certain neighborhoods are targeted. When we take a look at North Charleston, it is the African American neighborhoods that consistently have been the neighborhoods with the highest crime. Crime is a function of roughly two things: the chronic joblessness in your community and the lack of contracts. Both of those things are controlled by the person who runs the city. Happens to be the mayor, because he's paid to manage the departments, whether it be the procurement department, whether it be the human resources. And so as a result of that mismanagement, in this case, we have a situation where the crime is high in North Charleston, but not all of North Charleston. Specific areas in North Charleston that happen to be areas where they not only get federal funds in order to take care, let's take for instance Echo Avenue. At one point, North Charleston received funding for weed and seed funding from the Department of Justice dealing with the high crime, highest homicide in the country. And so they got the federal funds with the weed and seed program. They took those funds and diverted those funds. Some of those funds, for instance, went to Seacoast Church.
Okay.
Seacoast Church happens to be over on Sumner Avenue. It's not in the target area of the Union Heights or Liberty Hill or Ackerby area, and not one black church received a penny. Not one black pastor received a penny from the Weed and Seed program. However, the funds were pulled down and diverted. When and Bonds Avenue LLC received Weed and Seed funds because there was a business that was in foreclosure. They used it to help to get them out of foreclosure. Once they were out of foreclosure, they then gave them a contract supposedly to store trash cans for the city. So again, a sole source contract that allowed them to then take advantage of city resources. It does not stop with just getting the funding down, because after you draw the funding down, now what happens is when it's not put in the neighborhood and the boy is still locked up and he goes to prison, we're talking $60,000 a year for the prison system, because the federal government gives them that. So here it is, they are looking at contracts for food, clothing, toothpaste, every single need they have when they are actually in jail. And we're not getting those contracts as the African American community. And it doesn't stop there. The young man works while he's in the prison system because they farm that labor out to corporate America. $13.58 an hour on average, with the jail getting $13 and the prisoner getting 50 cents that he has to pay back to the jail in order to live for expenses. It doesn't stop there, Quintin. It goes further. Once the young man is out of jail, now he's on probation and has to pay while he's on probation. So here we can take an 18-year-old man and they take 30 years out of his life, his working life, because they can get him into the system and use the system for the next 30 years to literally pull everything that he can actually make in life. Crime is very profitable depending on where you sit. And with private prisons coming, it's getting even worse. And so we have to take a look at what we are doing to our community and whether or not we want to continually allow the African American community to be used as modern day slavery. That's what it is. When we look at the 13th Amendment, if you're incarcerated, then they're allowed to enslave you because the 13th Amendment does not abolish slavery for those who happen to be incarcerated. And that's a sad thing in America.
This discussion will be to be continued, actually. John Singletary, the North Charleston mayoral candidate, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate this.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Quintin.
Anytime. Let's do it again.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.